I wanted to give you a sense for the incredible diversity of human languages that exist all around the globe. And I also wanted to put English in context a little bit so you can really figure out where English lives in this crazy web of human languages. So I brought up this kind of wacky map. And this is not a map of the languages of the world. This is a map of the language families of the world. You can think of a language family as basically a group of languages that share a common ancestor. But instead of this common ancestor being an animal or an individual, that common ancestor is a language. Languages change over time. So if you have a language and you leave it alone for long enough, or you separate groups of people who are speaking this language, over the course of hundreds or thousands of years, a language breaks up into various different languages, and that original language is the progenitor of the language family that these new languages now belong to. So each color on this map represents one language family. And you can see in some cases they match up with borders that you might expect. So you can see over here in pink we have the Sino-Tibetan languages, which cover things like Tibetan over here, and Mandarin Chinese, and Cantonese, and Southern Min, and Hokkien, all of the various languages and dialects of China and the surrounding countries. So the Sino-Tibetan language family, the Sino-Tibetan, and it's called that because Sino means Chinese and Tibetan means Tibetan. The Sino-Tibetan languages all share some common ancestor. We can call it Proto-Sino-Tibetan. Now, we might not know anything about this language. Maybe we're able to reconstruct it from the modern languages, or maybe it's a mystery to us. But we know, based on the similarities that these languages share, whether that be in vocabulary or phonology or grammar, that there is some common ancestor that they all share. And the Sino-Tibetan language family is one of the biggest language families on Earth. You know, it has well over 1 billion speakers of Sino-Tibetan languages. That's not always the case, though. I mean, here in Western South America, you have the Quechuan languages and the Aymaran languages. And in yellow, these yellow bits covering South America are the Arawakan languages. And maybe these languages only have a couple million speakers combined, or some languages are down to a few thousand speakers, or maybe even speakers that you can count on one hand. Not every language family has the same number of languages left over. Sometimes a language family might only have one living descendant, like the Kartvelian languages, of which only Georgian really remains. Or maybe a language family is just reduced to a much smaller number of speakers than the original population, like the Eskimo Aleut languages of northern Canada and Greenland, which are much, much smaller than the Sino-Tibetan languages, for example. What I love about this map is you can see where there are territories where different language families have speakers. So, for example, in Australia, that greenish-blue color represents the English speakers, but then you can also see all of the Australian Aboriginal speakers nestled in. And those are speakers of Pama-Nyungan languages. I'm probably butchering the name. It's not so important that you actually memorize what all these language families are called, or what languages are members of which family, but it is useful to kind of see how these languages spread over time. So in red over here, you can see the Austronesian languages, which include things like the Polynesian languages, like Hawaiian and Tongan, and also Indonesian Malay languages, like Javanese and Indonesian. And you can see some people from the Austronesian family must have at one point broken off and gone to Madagascar, because in Madagascar you can see they're speaking an Austronesian language. So studying language families actually gives us clues about human geography. This beautiful big orange bit in the middle, these are the Afro-Asiatic languages. So you have included in this the Semitic languages. like Arabic and Hebrew and Amharic, spoken in Ethiopia. And then this green part here, these are the Niger-Congo languages, which include the Bantu languages of Southern Africa, the biggest of which by speakers is Swahili, but that also includes things like Zulu down in the south and Igbo in Nigeria. So you kind of have a sense for that. And then this greenish color that we saw down in Australia, that covers a huge portion of the world's surface. And these are the Indo-European languages. And they're called Indo-European because, as you can see, the North Indian languages are part of this language family. So the languages of Western Europe and the languages of North India actually share a common ancestor. We call this common ancestor Proto-Indo-European. It was spoken, maybe a few thousand years ago. We've kind of constructed it. We've kind of reconstructed what Proto-Indo-European might have sounded like based on the sounds and words that currently exist in the child and grandchild languages of Proto-Indo-European. So the reason this covers such a big part of the map is basically because of colonialism. You know, the speakers of languages like English and Spanish and Portuguese and French, these were the powers that colonized the world, and in doing so, they spread their languages to all the corners of the world. But this is a very big language family, so I'm going to zoom in on the Indo-European language family because that's what English is a member of. But if you speak another language, I highly encourage you to look into that language family and see what the relative languages for your language might be. So you might wonder how the languages of Western Europe could possibly be related to the languages of Northern India. They don't sound anything alike. But if you actually take an example word, then suddenly the similarities become very clear. So let's take the word brother, for example, in English. It's very clear that this word brother is related to other European words for brother. So in Dutch, for example, we have the word broer, and in French, we have the word frère. And of course, the French word frère comes from the Latin word frater, where we get the word fraternity in English. But it doesn't stop there. The Sanskrit word for brother is bhratar. Bhratar. So that's where all of the North Indian languages like Hindi and Gujarati and Punjabi and Bengali are all derived from a word that probably sounded something like that. And then in Old Persian, we have the word bhratar. In Old Celtic, we have the word brathair. So that's where Irish Gaelic and Welsh and Scottish Gaelic and Cornish and Breton all get their word for brother from. In Greek, we have frater, not unlike the Latin. And in Old Church Slavonic, which gave us the Slavic languages like Russian, Bulgarian, Ukrainian, Polish, we have the word bratru. And I'm probably screwing up the pronunciation there. But the point is basically all the languages from Ireland all the way to China, or at least most of them, share this common ancestor. And of the various tribes that spun off from this original Proto-Indo-European tribe, each one of those became its own language family. So you have the Hellenic languages like Greek, and then you have the Celtic languages like Irish, you have the Slavic languages, and you have the Indic languages, and the Iranian languages, and the Germanic languages, and the Romance languages. In addition to that, there are tons of other Indo-European language branches like Albanian and Armenian. These are kind of the families within the family. So there's tremendous diversity just within the realm of the Indo-European languages. So you can kind of think of this like a biological tree. You have like plants and animals. Then of the animals, you have, birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians, mammals. Then of the mammals, you have cats and dogs, etc., etc. Then of the dogs, it keeps on branching off. So let's zoom in just on the Germanic languages. And Germanic languages are a language family within the Indo-European family. So everything that's a Germanic language is a descendant of a language called Proto-Germanic, which was spoken thousands of years ago, and maybe we've reconstructed how it might have sounded based on the current Germanic languages that exist. But even Germanic languages are further subdivided into many categories. So on this map you can see the countries that are in blue make up the North Germanic languages. So these are sometimes called the Nordic languages or the Scandinavian languages. This is your Danishes and your Norwegians and your Swedishes, your Icelandics, your Faroese. Then down here, these ones are the West Germanic languages. And you might say, why aren't they called the South Germanic languages? The truth is there used to be some East Germanic languages as well, but these have all died out. These have pretty much all been replaced by Slavic languages. So what we're left with is the West Germanic languages. So English is Germanic, but then it's further subdivided as West Germanic, which includes things like German and Dutch. Then it's further subdivided into the Ingvaeonic. And you will never in your life have to know what that is. But it's just kind of interesting to see how specific it gets. So this includes some of the tiny languages that touch the North Sea. And then to get even more specific, so something like German is not an Ingvaeonic language. It's part of a different branch of the West Germanic languages. And then you get to the Anglo-Frisian languages, which includes things like West Frisian and North Frisian up here, and Saterland Frisian spoken in a small town in Germany. And then you finally get to the Anglic languages, which includes the stuff spoken around here. So that's English spoken in England, and Scots spoken in Scotland, and Hiberno English spoken in Ireland. So the Anglic languages are basically just the dialects of English. But it's important to kind of see how relative all these terms are. You can think of any language as kind of zooming in from this funnel of language families, and where you draw the line between what's actually a language versus what's actually a language family is almost irrelevant. The point is, every language, for the most part, has relatives. And in a lot of cases, when you zoom in close enough, you can see all these relationships between the languages. So I just chose to zoom in on English because it's the language I happen to be communicating with you in. But you can zoom in on pretty much any part of the world, and you'll find this incredible linguistic diversity, and I encourage you to do so.